It's Chelsea,
It's Nina.
and you're in the Critics' Kingdom. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Critics' Kingdom. So, this week we are following up on the Teen Beach series. We're finishing it out. There's only 2 movies, so, take series lightly there. But we're following up with Teen Beach 2, which came out in 2015. So I know that Nina and I, like we said on the first one, we didn't watch it live because by 2015 we had both graduated from college.
Yeah, this was well past when I was even contemplating Disney Channel as like a real network. But I can imagine that it was probably released to a pretty receptive and wide audience just based on the success and critical appeal of the first film.
Mm-hmm. Because as we said before, the first film, we really enjoyed it. And it was overall received very well. Like the children loved it. And that's because it was an objectively good film for a DCOM. So yeah, it was definitely one of those ones that we really enjoyed. So we were very interested to jump into the second one. So I think to start it off, Nina, would you recap on what happens in Teen Beach 2?
I would be delighted to, Chelsea. So, Teen Beach 2. We begin on it pretty much takes place sort of immediately after the events of the first film, or at least so it seems. It's the last night of summer. School starts the next day, and Mac and Brady, they're essentially, madly in love on the beach, and they're sort of celebrating what seems like an anniversary, but we will come to understand very soon that it can't be an anniversary because they've only been together for 3 months, which, Chelsea and I have thoughts on. But
Right.
They are, they're celebrating, the moment that they met at the top of the summer in the spot where they met on the beach. And I guess like the whole thing is that we learn that they actually met because of the film West Side Story. They were watching the movie and like they were projecting the movie on the beach, and that's, where Brady and Mac met for the first time. So, they're just, being, I guess, cute and in love, and there's a song, Best Summer Ever. And they go out for a moonlit surf, which is actually, it's kind of like, that's kind of cute. It's kind of romantic. Like,
Cute.
Yeah, if I was 15, I'd be like, yeah, that's Bae. Me and Bae moonlight surf. But Mac has been wearing the necklace that Layla gave her in the film, and she loses it in the water. So the next day, it's the first day of school, and we essentially see at school that, it's sort of the classic age-old trope of Brady and Mac are actually from 2 sort of very different worlds, very different friendship circles. Brady is, I guess, the quintessential kind of surfer dude, a bit lackadaisical, doesn't take school that seriously, and his friends don't encourage him, neither does his mother, to do that. Whereas we see that, Mac is super type A, she's running all these clubs, she's running the school dance, the Save the Beach dance that's coming up, and, she's thinking about college, and she's just taking quite the opposite of Brady has been taking school very, very seriously. So we start to sort of see, or they start to feel the tension of that in that single first day of being at school. And it comes to a head later that day because, they don't really get time to spend with each other during the day. And Mac is like, oh, but Brady, like, you're going to come to the college fair later. Like, we're going to go to the college fair together and it's going to be great. But Brady, he's been feeling insecure all day because he's sort of just watching Mac stunt all over the place, and he's seeing that maybe there are other guys who maybe, fit her better. And so he's a sad boy for a little bit. And he goes, he apparently has a workshop where he builds surfboards. This is something that we just learned. But he doesn't think much of that, or he doesn't seem to think that it's something interesting and that anyone would care about. But he's in there, sad, building his surfboards. He sings a little sad ballad about being on his own.
He does.
And in all of that, misses the college fair, or he doesn't realize that it's happening until the very end, shows up in like, is it cargo shorts or swim trunks? Something
Yeah, it's
crazy.
like cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt
And it's
and
raining,
sneakers.
and Mac is like, "What the hell, Brady? Why couldn't you like be here? You're supposed to be here. Why couldn't you do this one thing?" And then he sees Spencer standing next to Mac, who's the guy that is like surfacely more on Mac's level or whatever. And he's like, "Well, how come you're going to the college fair with Spencer?" It all blows up. They're very upset with each other. So that's sort of where we leave them. Meanwhile, back in the land of Wet Side Story, Mac's appearance and then disappearance from her life has really just lit Layla on fire. And now Layla is having a really hard time just sort of going along with the script of this world. She's sort of like constantly questioning choices. We see like there's this whole thing about Tanner having to go into the waves, and it's going to be a wild surf, and they're all like super worried about him. And she's like, "I could just come with you," and everybody's like, "Oh, no!" And she's like, "Okay, wait, sorry, I guess I can't," even though that doesn't really make much sense. And so they're staying at the edge of the beach. Tanner and the gang preparing for him to go do this dangerous thing, and she sees the necklace that she gave Mac in the water. And she starts to think like, like Mac said she came from another world, and the necklace is in the water. Like maybe I can just follow the water out into her world. So she does that. She goes into the water and ends up in our world. Because Tanner's pretty good at sticking to the script, knows that he sort of has to be with her wherever she's at. He also follows her into the water. So both Tanner and Mac end up in our world, hence seen at the end of the first film. They wash up on the beach, they interact with a phone for the first time. It's all very new and sort of wild to them. And on that same beach, it just happens to be that Mac is there picking up trash because save the beach, oceanography club, all that shabazz. And Brady likes to surf, and they're about to fight about like, why are you on the same beach as me, even though presumably there seems to be one beach in this place. But then they see Layla and Tanner, and they're like, "Oh crap!" So they essentially, they take them in, and they're both, Mac and Brady are like, they don't belong here, and we don't know what the consequences can potentially be for them being here because they're just like not real characters and all of that. So they decide to like try to figure that out, and in the meantime, like just like look after them. So they have to deal with that the next day of school. Obviously, there are like mini hijinks that ensue. There's a lot of song and dance where Layla and Tanner are trying to make people smile and be friends with each other and all this other nonsense. It's supposed to be fun. What if someone from 1962 was in school in 2015? But essentially, we get to a point where they see that Tanner and Layla loves this, by the way. Like, Layla is thriving here. Layla's doing calculus. Layla's learning physics, and she's just like excelling at everything. She's like, this world is so cool. And then they realize that like Layla and Tanner are able to like get wet. Layla can wear real clothes now, or wear not costume clothes. Tanner can get wet, and they're getting really nervous because they're like, "Do you remember when this started happening to us? Like we were about to like not exist." So they essentially try to switch tactics and make them sort of hate the real world, and it's not working at all. And so Mac very unsensitively reveals to them that they are in fact fictional characters from a fictional world, and they don't belong here. And then they sing the song, like "Life's Better in the Movies," trying to convince them that like their world is better than this world because in their world they don't have to make tough decisions and they don't have to do it, like everything's sort of mapped out for them already. Tanner doesn't seem too unbothered by this idea, but Layla is really, really, really not about it. And she's like, I don't want to go back to that. I didn't like that script. I didn't like that life that I was leading. And now that I've seen this, like, how could I ever do that? So in her frustration, she takes the necklace that was in theory their way home and just chucks it into the water and is like, I'm staying here. Meanwhile, back in, Wet Side Story, the characters are slowly starting to disappear and vanish because now the main characters are gone. So the movie like doesn't exist anymore. The story of the movie doesn't exist anymore, and they're freaking out about it, and they don't know what to do. But then they see the necklace come to the shore again because Layla has just thrown it, and they're like, "Oh, maybe we can follow this necklace to wherever Layla and Tanner went. Like maybe we just have to find them because like they're the stars of not that they know they're in a movie, but like they're like the important ones of their lives, and all this weird stuff started happening once they left. So on that beach, after they've been upset, then we see all of the cast of Wet Side Story show up on the beach, and they essentially tell Layla and Tanner what's going on, and Mac and Brady are like, "Do you see? You guys all have to go back. Like, they're all disappearing because you guys aren't there, and we don't know what's going to happen if you stay here. You might start to disappear too." And it's this whole big hullabaloo, and they agree to Layla and Tanner agree to go back. So we see them leave. But we do note that Layla and Tanner feel bad that like Mac and Brady aren't together anymore. So then it's the night of the big Save the Beach dance that Mac was running, and at this dance it's just that like that long lost lover across the room sort of thing. They're fighting. They don't want to be fighting. They don't know what to do about it. Yada yada yada. And there's a few different songs and dance numbers, and then the entire cast of Wet Side Story shows back up. And Mac is like, "What are you doing here?" And they're essentially like, "We couldn't bear the thought of you two not being together. You belong together. You're so right for each other. You should be together." And they're trying to convince them of that. But in the midst of all of that, literally they all disappear, but Layla and Tanner. So now the situation is for real dire. So they have to. So Mac and Brady are like, "Okay, like what are we gonna do?" Because they've also like lost this necklace now. And Brady sort of figures out, he's like, "Okay, like we surfed to get there the first time. Like I sort of have this invention that's like a surfboard that allows you to surf without the surf, without the waves. It is a jet ski. Let me make this very clear to y'all. The boy comes out with a jet ski, but they take the emblem off of the surfboard that Mac has that her grandfather built, and they put it onto this like new contraption, and they essentially are able to, after a little bit of trial and error, get sort of Layla and Tanner off just in time. And there's sort of no real immediate way to know whether or not it worked, but they sent off. And right before that, Mac and Brady have obviously been bonding through this like turbulent attempt to fix the situation. And Mac sort of expresses, she's like, "Wait a minute, if that movie never existed, maybe like how would we have met, because that's the movie that brought us together." And she's like really worried about it and all that stuff. And Brady kind of does that like, "I'll love you in this world or any other" sort of situation. and so they send off Layla and Tanner, and then we see what happens is that like Brady had been in the water. He goes back to the shore, and it's still the night of the dance, but the dance has changed. The Save the Beach dance is now, at the beach instead of at the school gym. They're projecting a movie, and also are dressed up in costume, like a suggestion that Brady had in the top of the movie. And Mac was like, "Well, the dance is already planned, so that can't happen." And we essentially figure out pretty quickly that like, oh, this is like they didn't meet at the top of the summer, because Wet Side Story does no longer exist, but that's just because Layla went, like, when she went back, decided to change up the script and everything, and now it's, Layla Queen of the Beach instead of Wet Side Story. And essentially what we get is at the end, they meet at this dance for the first time, Mac and Brady, and we get sort of a new meet cute and a sort of alternate reality, and like the beginning of a new love story. Or the end of this film is like another version of this faded romance about to begin. And that is Teen Beach 2.
Cool. So we'll be right back, guys, with the review. So for the review, I mean, I feel like overall, Nina and I were underwhelmed. especially coming off of the first one, which, like we said, we absolutely enjoyed a lot and thought it was such a fun twist and like just a great way to do an old genre and reimagine it in a innovative way. Um, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the best thing we liked in this one was the choreography was still pretty good, but I think that's because they had the same director who did the first one, and he also choreographed a chorus line. Like he knows what he's doing in terms of choreo. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like overall this one was very like we also found a lot of inconsistencies. I feel like that was something that also really bothered us
Yeah,
while we were watching it because we watched them also back to back, which I feel like is how they actually got away with a lot of the inconsistencies because it was 2 years for the kids that were watching this. If they watched it live because the first one came out in 2013, this one came out in 2015. So, by that point you're kind of like the details are kind of hazy.
yeah, and children are known to have very short attention spans. But yeah, it was a true deflation of a high. Like I because
Yeah.
I because I actually came into it very excited. I was like, we gonna have some more good music, we go dance a little bit more, but that was also my own fault, I guess, because I feel like our foray into the Disney Channel original movie suite has shown us maybe if like one thing more than anything other, like we like they just don't need to make sequels. Like the Disney Channel original movies don't need sequels. They don't
Yeah.
seem to hold up very well, especially in comparison to what often are like really great first films, which is why they get a sequel in the first place.
Yeah, and I think the only one that we've seen that we thus far are like, oh wow, this was actually a pretty decent follow-up was Xenon, the sequel. Um,
But
and
not Z3.
yeah.
Like we didn't need the thirds. Like they
We're not getting into the trilogies and how we definitely don't need those. Because we saw the same thing in Halloween Town. Um, but I definitely think like
And
Xenon's
Halloween
one of
Town
the
2 was
few,
good too.
and
We have to
Halloween Town 2
yeah,
was pretty
that was
good. The early ones were pretty decent. I just think it kind of like went downhill because I feel like what always happens is people want to I don't know. It's like I feel like they don't want to create a new story, which I feel like is when sequels shine, is if it's like you're using the same characters and you're using the same general world, but you're creating a different story out of it. Like I just think of successful sequels, and this is gonna sound very crazy, but I feel like most people agree on this, is like Shrek 2.
that's not
Was
that's not crazy. That's
Yeah,
that's
but that's why I said
that's
most people
beloved.
agree about it. Like I personally love Shrek 2 a lot more than Shrek 1, but I think it's because they expanded the world and because you already knew all the characters, they could take them all in this completely different way that they couldn't do in the first one. So I think that that's when it tends to work best, honestly.
I feel similarly about Lion King 2, Simba's Pride.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But that's because like they do a continuation of the story. It's like I mean, there's also the whole thing where it's like the first one's Hamlet and the second one's Romeo and Juliet. So like I like that, a little
Mm-hmm.
nod to the bard. But um, but like it's a continuation of the line. Like if this was about the pride and about like you're furthering the story at the end of Lion King. At the end of Lion King, we see Kiara being born or being presented to the world, and then
Right.
like this is her story. But yeah, I think I like really agree with you there, and I think that that was definitely something that we noted and had a huge problem with as we were watching this film. Is that like I know when, like my first thought was just like I don't love the fact that we're just like living in this trope of you know oh like because they have different interests like now it's gonna be impossible for them to be together at school. Like it
Right.
just feels like that like I feel like first of all Disney like did that well with High School Musical. Like the DCOM suite did that well with High School Musical, so they didn't need to do it again. It didn't
Yeah.
need to be reiterated for this. Um, and like, and then generally, like, it felt like it was still repetitive of the first film. Like, what's the first film about? Mac, in theory, has this like level of ambition and wants to do these things like based on this ambition, and Brady is kind of like, but why? um, and and it's about like being allowed to make your own choices. This film is exactly the same concept. It's just that it's put in a school setting. Um and even that is a bit problematic because it really is only a day or two. So it didn't all have to go down like this. But yeah, there was nothing that felt fresh about it. There was nothing that felt interesting or contemplative. And it's especially a shame because of, like kind of as you're saying, Chaz, like the premise of this is so interesting. Or not so, but it's a very fun premise for kids. Like all right, what
Yeah.
happens when the movie characters come into the real world? And I think the easy thing to do is, oh, like they come into the real world and they love it, but they can't stay here, or
Right.
they'll make everybody friends. Like those are the very easy, obvious ways to take it, and it's because they've been done 10 million times over. And like, I don't know, it feels like one of those things of like these sequels start to feel like because they are being made just to make that buck or just to capitalize on something that was successful. They don't. We've talked about this a lot on this podcast. Like they don't seem to have much care. Like that's something that sort of keeps coming up, like whether or not the movies are sort of made with care,
Right.
and like thoughtful intention. And this feels like one of the ones that falls flat on that. But that feels like particularly. It's particularly noticeable and particularly deflating, disheartening because the first one feels so different and feels like it was made with quite a bit of care.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think it's like you were saying, when they do come into the world and they start going to the school, it's basically like you get the stereotype, but they're the same people as Mac and Brady. So it's like, so what's the point? Like, it's not like you're even giving me something to have them go off of Mac and Brady. Like, if they
Yeah.
had made them like complete opposites or something when they came into this world, and it's like suddenly Layla is like, you know what? I actually think I do want to focus solely on surfing. I get along much better with Brady than I do with Mac, or something like that. Could have been interesting, I think, a different way to play it. Um, but yeah, they basically end up just becoming the stereotypes of Mac and Brady. And also just them coming in and their whole purpose is just to make everybody smile. There's a whole song about that.
And it really does not need to exist.
It doesn't serve any type of purpose. Like it was just like,
Was it turn
okay.
that frown upside down?
Literally, that is the lyrics to the song, is turn the frown upside down. And yeah, it's just all about making everybody smile and get along with each other and not have cliques in high school. But again, I think as we were watching it, I said this, I was like, they already tackled this with Status Quo in High School Musical. So, and did it better, if
So
we're
much
being
better.
honest.
So
Um,
much better.
so yeah, it felt weird. And then I think something else that we also had brought up was also the fact that they were Brady and Mac had only allegedly been dating for 3 months. And we found this odd because if you watch the first one, they have
We'll
clearly
break it
been
down.
dating for longer than like it isn't even like you don't even have to really question it, because just the way they are around each other, it's like you've already been dating you would have already been dating for longer than a month or two, because if we're assuming that the second one's happening at the end of the summer and the first one's happening at the beginning, there's no way that you would be like that after 3 weeks. Like I'm just sorry, it's just that's not how it is. And it was just like it was just a weird inconsistency in that regard. And then also the fact that they act like they didn't go to the same school in this one, but in the first one they clearly did, because when Mac's aunt comes, she like Mac tells us like, I did agree to stay here in, wherever they are, XYZ tropical island, and go to school here for like the first 2 years, and now it's like coming on my junior year, so I gotta go. So it's like, so clearly you've been here for years. You know
Yeah.
this boy. Like,
And it's like, and I mean, I guess I suppose there is a world, there is a world in which they didn't meet in high schools. Some high schools are really big. I don't necessarily believe that a high school like on this beachfront property would be that large and have that big of a student body that they wouldn't have interacted in some way, shape, or form. But like, even if we take that premise of like, all right, maybe it was too big for them to have met. Brady, like, very clearly in the first one speaks to her. It's actually, like, it sounds as if they have been dating since they were 14. It sounds as if they've been dating since, like, top of high school. Like, they have spent, like, all of this time together. And that's why he's like, wait, how are you just not going to tell me that you were bouncing? Because if the premise is that they fall in love, like, at the top of the summer, I think that if there's one thing that teenagers understand very thoroughly, it is the concept of the summer fling.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be like the idea of her being like, "Oh, I'm leaving to go to boarding school." It wouldn't have like thrown him that wildly. You know what I mean? Like that just
No,
doesn't it doesn't track. And if he's a surfer and her grandfather runs the surf shop, like they can't have like not met before. You know, like it just doesn't.
it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
It doesn't
Like we were
track.
saying, it truly does not add up. Like it's like you clearly. What clearly happened is, again, I think this always happens with DCOMs. They never know which ones are gonna pop off, and I don't think they thought that this one was gonna pop off. And then what probably happened is Disney is like, "Oh, that did really well. Make another one."
Yeah,
Because that's very much a thing that's done in studios. And so then they had to scramble to be like, well, what's a plot, you know? And I think they had, I feel like they did leave in that back door of like, they wash up in the now type of thing. But I also I don't know if that had been like originally planned or not. Or whether it was just going to be like, we'll leave it there, but we may not even ever act on it.
yeah,
So yeah, I definitely think it was. I don't think anybody had the real plot for why it would make sense that they suddenly came to 2015. I feel like that was the disconnect. It was like, oh, maybe we will do a sequel and we want them to come to the now, but how are we going to get them in the now in a way that makes sense? And to do that, I guess they decided we're going to switch around some of the dates for Brady and Matt.
but it's just it didn't even. It also didn't have to be the school year.
That was,
You know what I mean? Like it didn't have to. Like they didn't have to start school. Like it could have just been them. It like finishing out the summer. It could have still been an actual teen beach movie. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, or they could have like made it they could have done a reverse and had like the villains on the 2015 side and they need to bring in the people from 1962 to help them defeat them. Like you could have made it something like that too, where it's like, all right, well, they got to bring them back in because how else are they going to get over, these two villains that are trying to create a climate change machine again in 2020 or 2015 because it hasn't ended. So yeah, I'm like yeah, there's just other ways that I think they could have gone with it for sure. That would have made a lot more sense. Because that's also that's the biggest crux to my issue is I'm like, this just doesn't make sense.
It does live in a world of very, very loose logical threads. And convolution. Like it's just like I don't.
A world of confusion, truly. A world of
Why
confusion.
is it like this? But I will say in all of that, Tanner is a shining light in this film because he's just so wildly. They make him so dumb.
They made him so dumb,
so
guys.
dumb. I don't really know why. Because like they kind of imply it in the first one, but he's not.
This one, he is like Amanda Seyfried in Mean Girls. Like it's just
it's bad. But it's quite. I mean,
bad.
It's funny, and I mean, like, I guess if you want to play like the idea of like, oh, like instead of it being like a blonde beach girl, because they do also use the term beach bunny in this a bunch, right? Like his friend who is he supposed to be Afro Latino? Like, why is he constantly speaking like just saying Spanish words? I don't. Is that supposed to be part of surf culture? It's very unclear.
It probably is because I know the actor who played him is not, as far as I know. But
so, like,
yeah.
But like, yeah, I guess it could be this thing of like instead of the blonde beach bunny, it's being like, a woman. It's the man. It's Tanner. He's like the blonde beach bunny. So I guess like that might have been the impetus, but like, it still doesn't. That's not really a reason, like it's a choice, but it's not. There's not really a reason behind it. But it was, those characters are always fun. Like Amanda Seyfried has some of the best lines in Mean Girls. Her character's Karen, right?
Yeah, she's Karen.
Like has some of the best lines in Mean Girls, and like those characters are always fun. And they provide a level of I would say like physical humor often.
Yeah.
That I quite appreciate. So like that was pleasant to like watch him do that. But yeah, it just doesn't track. Also, we did have it like not an issue, but like I do really love how like Mac essentially said, because Layla's like, I don't want to go back to the movie, and Mac is like, you can change the movie, right? Like you can make the movie anything you want it to be. You're the star. So Layla's decision is to turn into a tyrant because that's where we land at the end of this film. Like it is no longer West Side Story. It is now Layla, Queen of the Beach.
Yes.
It is all about her.
Yes. She is
And I mean,
literally
I guess
the person at the marquee. The marquee
you know
person
what I
on the
mean.
poster.
I guess like go ahead, girl, and get yours, right? Like I'm not like super mad at it, but I am also like we went to a whole other end of the spectrum. And now, like, you know what I mean? Like she was repressed in the first one, but now, like, I'm sure other characters are being repressed in this new one. We don't really get to see it, so we're not sure. But I have a feeling.
Exactly, because I think something else that we also noticed that was kind of like a weird, it wasn't even an inconsistency, it was just something that we noted, but like the fact that Mac would have probably done very well on an East Coast prep school. Like we were just like, so she should have been at Deerfield or Exeter or Andover. Like, why is she
Or choke. You know, just
like
like
she's just the type of
Middlebury.
person that
Just
would have
anywhere
thrived in that
but there.
environment.
Yeah. It did. And also, like, I really love, like, that there's this whole thing where it's like I have this whole thing when Brady's mom walks in and tells him like not to stress anything. Like he's like, I might go to the college fair, and she's kind of like, oh, do as you please, da da da. And then like there's this whole thing, like the whole point at the end is that she realized, Mac realizes that he's not ambitionless, and you know potentially not really going many places off the beach because she sees the surfboard and she's like, oh my god, you built those? Like, that's so incredible. And it's like, also, Brady has lots of potential and could probably be a really great engineer, but nobody is encouraging him to do anything.
Exactly.
Like, it's like this thing of like, there are different ways to lead lives 110%, but like, it's just strange because it's like you watch it, you're like, but like she would have probably been really happy at that boarding school.
Because she is exactly. She is the type that would have probably done very well and thrived there. That's not to say any shade towards their school in XYZ tropics or down to the shore, because again, we don't know where they are. But
Or even a boarding school on the beach, but like she just seemed like she would do, or where she would have done well, and we talked about like Zoe 101, like that's a boarding school, right?
Pacific Coast Academy.
Academy. You know what I mean? Like she could have gone to Pacific Coast Academy.
It's true. It's true.
It just seems like she would do well with, being challenged and being pushed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Brady would too. I was so upset when his mother said that to him. I was
He's like, just chill.
like you're the reason that this boy is insecure and thinks that he has nothing to offer this girl. He does, but he doesn't know that. Because you've been letting him run around and surf all day and not do his math homework.
Yeah, that was just a very weird part, and I was like, wow, so her aunt was not a villain? But her aunt probably just
I never thought her aunt was a villain.
Probably, I know, but I'm sure like if a kid's watching it, they probably thought her aunt was the villain in the first one because she was trying to take her away. But I'm like, so her aunt probably just literally saw the exact same character trait she had and was like, let me do
or her
for
mother
you what
had
nobody else
she got
did
pregnant,
for me.
Quite funny.
Yes. But yeah, and also her grandfather and her aunt are never in there. No parents are mentioned on her side in this one. We only see Brady's mom briefly. I will say though, as a child who did attend a school in the tropics, I did appreciate the ode to board short culture. Because that was a very big thing in my school in Hawaii, to the point that my private school had to ban kids from wearing board shorts and flip-flops, because that is all people, like, people would change into their uniforms later, but like a lot of kids in my school would go surfing or to the beach in the morning, because we were really close to Waikiki, which is like one of the big beaches around there. And my school, they had to ban it because people would like come in, girls would like wear bikinis instead of bras. It was like a whole thing. Like they were like, y'all cannot, like they nearly banned Roxy and Billabong because of the chokehold they had on us as a school.
That is so funny.
So I was like, I appreciate this ode to, like, tropical culture, because it is true depending on where you live. Like that was very much a thing in my high school. But yeah, overall, I think we were kind of we were unimpressed, and we think this could have been done much better than it was, way better than it was.
Yeah, just generally just not. It wasn't it. It wasn't it, y'all. Watch the first one.
Yeah, we do still recommend the first one.
Really don't need to watch the second.
No.
You'll be fine without it.
So Nia, would you show this one to your kids?
If it comes on immediately after the first one, like I'll just leave. They could do what they want. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't want anybody singing that damn "Frown Upside Down" song in my house, though. So, if it gets to a certain point, I might have to ban certain songs from the film. But, yeah, I mean, fine if you want to. If you want to. What about you?
Yeah, I don't think I'd be watching it with them, but like, yeah, they could. Like, it's not like it has anything. It doesn't have anything that gives me pause. It's literally just like not interesting or nearly as developed as the first one. Like that is really the only issue I have with it. I'm just like, but it's just not good. Like, it's just not a good movie.
Yeah, it might be one of those things where you're like, why don't you just watch High School Musical?
Truly.
It's the same story.
Truly.
It's the same story. That's better. I promise. It's the same
Truly
story.
Watch
just go watch
Teen
High School
Beach
Musical
1 and then watch High School Musical, and you got it.
You
like, literally got it. You got the whole thing.
The entire maze of high school romance now. Go.
So I think with that, guys, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.